As children running through the halls with a pair of scissors in hand, we've all been warned against that simple act by our mom, dad, and teacher. Yet have any of our dumbasses ever taken their words seriously? After all, nothing ever really happens, right? For one little girl, the nightmare that would haunt her for life started with a mundane object, just an ordinary pencil. Here's the story of how an innocent 4-year-old fell and got a pencil stuck in her head for 55 years. Let's get into it. 1952. 4-year-old Margaret was walking around in the picturesque city of Dachshund, Germany, parents in town, when she tripped, tumbling to the floor. Normally, she would pick herself up and carry on, but this time, something felt terribly wrong. An excruciating pain was concentrated on the right side of her face. An 8-centimeter length pencil she was carrying had pierced through her cheek, driving its tip right into her brain. Her bright blue eyes widening in shock, she started crying. In an interview with Bill, Margaret recalled it bore right through the skin and disappeared into my head. It was incredibly painful. She was immediately rushed to the hospital. Pencil still in cheek, her parents hoped it could be removed, but they were faced with the reality surgery would be next to impossible. The medical technology that would allow the safe removal of the pencil without damaging the brain tissue didn't exist. Luckily, the pencil had missed the aorta, a vital artery, and the optical by only millimeters, so she was able to survive. Medical staff treated the wounds, however. They had no choice but to decide the pencil had to stay. No doctor at the time dared to operate, fearing for the little girl's life. As time passed, the pencil now invisible from the outside. As the wound in her cheek began to show its effects, Margaret, suffering from chronic pain, nosebleeds, and eventually started losing her sense of smell. She was beginning to think there was no end in sight to her horror story. Margaret had to live for 55 long years with the pencil fully embedded in her brain, along with all the side effects that came with it. During the years life went on, she became a math teacher and also found love on a beautiful summer evening in 1985, where she met Hans Udrich Wagnera, renowned boxing coach. Their love story began when Wooly was on vacation with a friend, sat the gold-red seaside. The group was at a disco when he saw the woman who had eyes that pierced, none other than Margaret. He asked her for a dance, and when Margaret obliged and got up from her seat, was taken aback by her height, as she was a foot taller than him. Laughing, he said, "Would you please take off your shoes?" To which she was happy to oblige, dancing barefoot with Wooly Ma. Margaret had found blissful love, and in only a few months, they were married. Margaret isn't the only person unfortunate enough to have to live with something embedded in her brain. But what's more surprising is that doctors can decide to leave even smaller objects just where they are. Removal is the first thing that comes to mind when it comes to foreign objects. Just like in cases where veterans can have bullets lodged in their body, most of the time a medical professional will make the decision to take the foreign object out to avoid infections. But it gets much more complicated when the part where it's dislodged is our delicate brains. Depending on where in the brain the damage is, problems with thinking and moving can occur, not to mention excruciating headaches. But longer the object is left, the further it can migrate into brain tissue and bring more complications, such as impaired movement, nerve damage, and brain swelling are only some issues that were reported. It seems like the logical thing to do would be removing the items. So why would a doctor choose to keep an item lodged in someone's brain? Health professionals have to make tough calls and decide if the benefits outweigh the risks. Like in a case study from 1999, published in the International Journal of Legal Medicine, when a 28-year-old man was found with a bullet dislodged in the back of his head. Shot at close range by a robber in his workplace where he was managing director of a large caveman enterprise, he was left for dead, locked in the boiler room by the perpetrator. The body was discovered 2 days later, propped against a wall. But the victim was disoriented but responsive and very much alive. He had complete cortical blindness. Neurosurgeons initially believed the damage was a superficial soft tissue injury, but a cranial scan showed the full extent of his trauma. The bullet was lodged inside his brain, as well as some metal fragments and bone splinters. While some of these small parts were removed, the medical team ultimately decided to leave the deformed projectile in the periphery of the right temporal lobe, where it wouldn't be causing any direct problem. However, removing it had the possibility of affecting his speech center. Some fragments also remained in the left occipital lobe to the proximity of the visual center of the brain. Ultimately, they decided that the risk of removal would outweigh any benefit. The victim, after suffering from amnesia and going through rehabilitation, slowly gained back his motor skills, memory, and vision, and eventually made a full recovery 3 years after the incident. The man still had reduced concentration and some loss of sensation in his left hand's fingers, but was able to go back to work with only minor complications. So what happened to Margaret? After 5.5 decades, the childhood accident was still affecting her life, with chronic headaches and nosebleeds. As she grew, the pencil had shifted from its original location, but Dr. Hans Baerbaum, an ENT specialist at a Berlin General Hospital, was able to determine the exact location of the pencil through a CT scan. The doctor found Margaret's case unique, as the trauma had happened so long ago, and while Margaret was ready to end the pain she was suffering from and finally live a normal life. She was nervous. She later said she couldn't sleep the night before the operation. "I was afraid I hadn't sorted out all my affairs. I wrote letters to my relatives." The procedure also had the risk of her going blind, as the pencil was so close to her optic nerve. However, Dr. Baerbaum's expertise in brain surgery for gunshot victims, as well as pulling out glass shards from people who had gone through traffic accidents, proved successful. It was a difficult procedure, but with perfect precision, Dr. Baerbaum removed a 6-centimeter long piece of pencil while having to leave in the 2-centimeter tip that was embedded firmly into the brain, matter that had grown around it, making it too risky. However, the section remaining lodged into the brain did not pose a danger. Margaret, marveling at the brittle chunk of pencil piece during her post-surgery, was finally free of her pain-filled life. It's important to mention that if you ever have an incident where you find yourself dealing with a foreign object seeking professional help is crucial. Taking matters into your own hands might seem tempting, but doing so could lead to devastating complications, including severe blood loss, nerve damage, and irreparable harm to tissues. Thankfully, Margaret's future looks bright and filled with wonderful scents, according to Dr. Baerbaum, who gave her a clean bill of health. At the end of the day, our bodies are resilient and can pull through even the right amount of stress. Based on my latest video about how one man survived the ocean floor for 3 days, tell me more ideas or stories you would like to hear. Thank you and have an amazing time.